My name is Jonathan Bragg. I lead our labs and innovations and accelerators team here at Mindset, and I had a very esteemed pleasure of working with Blane from Patterson Companies on a design thinking to AppDev project throughout. So we're hoping that in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll not only take you through kind of what happened in design thinking, but also some really, really cool value that came out of this project. So I'll let you introduce yourself quick.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Blane Beebe. I work for Patterson Dental, and so we're a dental distributor that pretty much sells anything you see in a dentist's office, installs it, repairs it, and I'm in our technical service business team.
Perfect. And so I'll get us started here. I think, raise your hand if you don't know what Mindset does by now. I think everybody here has worked with us multiple times. We've done a lot of projects together, so I'm going to skip through a lot of the Mindset stuff, but we're going to get right into the project. And one thing I did want to say is, throughout our solutions experiences, throughout the things that we've done with clients, again, we'll meet you where you are at, but what we'd love to do is really start out with that problem finding, that exploration, that discovery. Let's really see if there's things that we've already done before within our accelerators teams. Perhaps you're testing out new technologies and you want to look into our labs areas. We'd love to start there and really push into that design space, that design thinking space, which we'll talk about a lot today. And then into the delivery and then management of that. So management means kind of some of the results that Blane's going to talk about today. So what are those KPIs that we want to monitor? What are those things we want to track long term to really showcase the success of some of these projects and what they do? And so kind of jumping in to the design thinking process, and if anybody was here for the last presentation with Jill and Ryan from Ecolab, this slide will look very familiar. This is our design thinking process, and we, again, include the delivery phase here just because you can see we build, measure, learn. Every single sprint, every single time. And I think we can talk about, what was it, after, I think, the first sprint, we almost flipped the design on its end, and it's because we learned. We kept learning every single time. But within the first two stages here, when we really look at that scoping, that discovery, and that framing of everything, Blane came to us, we came in with a problem statement, right? We knew we were working with service techs. Past that, we didn't know much, right? We wanted to go out and learn. And so that discovery and that framing and that process of coming together within a workshop to do this, it was really the collaboration, and for me, always the most fun part of the experience, because you're talking with end users, you're getting people involved, you're really starting to ideate and think of things in a different way than how people are using them today. So it's a little bit about the process. This is called the balanced team. So what we love to have as a part of our project teams in every single project is we have an amazing product manager. Blane played this role for us during this project, still owns it to this day, right? And looking after the teams and the service techs that are out there. The product designer is really looking at that experience. Sam said something really, really important this morning, which was really key to anything you can take away from today, I think, is just the experience is the product. Right? We want to give people a really, really good experience with the things that they do at work and the technology and the software that they use. Lastly, we'd be nowhere without developers. If we couldn't actually put this stuff into production and let people use it and build it, we wouldn't have anything. So this is the team involved. I think we were one of the lucky ones that I think we were one of the last design thinking workshops to be in our original App House space. So now we have a much larger space. This is a really fun room that we were able to be in. Had some interesting paintings on the wall. It's all about creating a collaborative design space that gives people really an open feel. And I think the best part about these spaces, especially for people from Patterson or other companies, is that it gets them out of their day-to-day lives. They don't need to check emails all day long. They know the business is taken care of. We're focused on creating some really cool innovations and collaborating. And so these spaces are supposed to get people out of that day in the life mindset and really come together and ideate and look at different solutions. And so these are just a couple of pictures of the team and the things we were going through as we were mocking different things up on the whiteboard and trying and testing different solutions and stuff along the way, which was really fun. So that's kind of step one. Create a really open, collaborative design space for people to come to. And that happens with the SAP App House, the App House network. I think there's about 18 or 19 locations these days all around the world that are all App House network partners. Mindset happened to be the first one in the US. I think there's one more in the US now down south, but there's a lot of really, really cool network partners that do this as well. So the first thing that we love to do within design thinking is I love the work. I love the end-to-end experiences of what people do out in what I'll say real work, not just developing software, but actually getting things done for people out in the real world. And the first thing we do is we really want to empathize. And so what better way to do that is to immerse yourself in the experience. We spent a couple weeks, I think, on the road between West Coast and East Coast, jumping in Patterson, what was it?
Vans.
Yep, the Patterson vans. So these were Ford Sprinters, Mercedes Sprinters that were out on the road delivering service for Patterson. And so a couple of these screenshots really show you a day in the life of the people actually doing these things. Where are their laptops? They're sitting on machines. We're at Applebee's for lunch trying to enter a service work order. This is the as-is process of the day, right? Trying to get through a service work order, trying to get things out there, on down looking at dental pieces and dental equipment and trying to find, is this 3mm O-ring something that I have on the truck, or do I have to go order it from somewhere? And getting into the SAP systems involved, you can see maybe even a little bit on the first left screenshot, that's SAP CRM. And sometimes trying to get into SAP CRM on the road, on a mobile card, trying to remember your logon as a service tech because you're there to get work done. You want to get through your service order. All those things add up to that experience. And so these are all things that you learn and only learn riding around with these guys. Like, what is their experiences? We're quiet the entire time. We just want to take in exactly what they're doing and what's going on in real life. So this is actually probably the most fun part for me, is just to immerse myself in kind of the day-to-day work of what these people do. So that's number 2. So first, create a collaborative design space. Second, really get into the day in the life shoes of an end user. Now, thirdly here is when we transition into more of like the Fiori design thinking session. And we'll hand it over to you to kind of talk through your feelings around how we worked with the design thinking session, and then how we really looked into doing that with Fiori. So I'll hand it over.
Sounds good. So really, we were very on purpose about the group we pulled together of the end users. We wanted to make sure, we had technicians, obviously, that are the end users, but also schedulers, and how does this maybe impact them? Service leadership from both our corporate office, from the field, and really geographically spaced out. So rural areas, metro areas, really savvy technology technicians versus maybe more the old school guys who don't know technology as much, and how's that going to work for them, right? So in really starting to understand those pain points. So they did the ride-alongs, but also just bringing that group in. We'd never had that same group together before. I think that's been mentioned a couple times. So getting us all in the same room and really getting them thinking about how could we do this differently, rather than having that frame of CRM and how can I make CRM better. It's like the old screens he was showing up at the beginning of the presentation here. So the other pain points we talked about were also on the business side, right? So what were the business problems or the KPIs that we were trying to deliver as part of this project? At Patterson, we have a governance board that we have to go in front of to try and get resources, right? And we have to have a good business case. So worked with Mindset to kind of put together what that might look like, and came up and were very on purpose about what we were trying to accomplish, and measured that throughout as we were deploying, and continue to this day. So with that, we came out of this, with mock-ups of what that solution might look like, right? So different ideas for different screens and functionality. How could we take, these 8 clicks in CRM and make it one button in Fiori and free up a lot of time? So if you go to the next one, I'll actually steal that from you.
Go for it.
Sure. So, the end user involvement, I can't stress enough. I work at corporate. If I don't know what these guys need, right? I'm not going to pretend like I do. And if I thought I did and I did all the design myself, we'd probably end up about 8 miles from where we should have been, right? So because this was a totally new UI and a new workflow, the thing with CRM where they were coming from, just to give you a little context, took them about 8 to 10 minutes to complete a work order. And there really weren't any, there wasn't a workflow or any bumpers. So they just had to remember, okay, I have to do this, and then I have to click save, and then I have to do that. And, you know, there's no systematic enforcement of any of that. So we really, you know, come out of this with some of these maybe screen designs, and that helps shape then what our user stories are. So now we can start estimating, you know, effort. We can look at, with that high resolution prototype, which we'll look at in just a second, you know, what is our MVP? What do we need to deliver so that a service technician can move away from CRM and do a service order end to end in Fiori? And then we also had a sales team had engaged with you guys and had built some really cool sales reporting and tools for them. Yep. So we just kind of piggybacked on their success and jumped in with them. All right, so this just gives you an idea of kind of the different prototypes. So it really starts with sketching on a piece of paper, maybe when somebody's doing their ride-alongs and learning kind of about the whole process of a service order and what we need to do. Ordering parts, determining warranty, contracts, that kind of thing. To the low-res or low-fi mock-up, which is when we were at the app house, yep, and really starting to kind of sketch stuff out. And it was cool to see, I think, you know, some of the users, and even myself, you know, you get stuck in that CRM mindset. And once you see like, oh my gosh, we can build this just like an iPhone app, right? And you really start getting the juices flowing and some excitement. So
people start running up to the whiteboard, like
exactly.
erasing stuff.
Oh, what if it did this?
The best part is during that session, it costs $0 to erase a whiteboard.
Yeah.
100 different times.
Exactly.
And I think I took one of the, you know, it's not a competition in drawings, but if it was my drawing up there, it would look like the random squiggly boxes that you see in the whiteboard. Obviously, there was someone in the room that had a little bit of artistic talent that
right.
we can't match.
Yep. And what's really cool, and they talked about it in the last session, but when you get that high-res prototype, it's clickable, right? So it's within what was it, a couple days, I think, after the design thinking session, we had a working prototype that we could send a link out to the people that were on site with us, and they could start clicking through. And then you start to really understand. It's one thing if they see all the screenshots, oh yeah, they look pretty cool, yeah, great. But once they start clicking through, that's when you start catching things where maybe the button placement isn't intuitive, or something's out of order in how they typically do their work, right? So that's where we learn that. And again, really haven't spent much money. You're just doing a mock-up, and then that shapes, again, the future user stories and work.
Yeah, and the iterations there are what's important. Is as you go from low fidelity all the way to high fidelity, you get those next level of questions along the way. So as you're clicking through the prototype, you really see, oh, is this actually going to work for me in how I do my work?
Right. And I think we came up with a lot of the exception scenarios too, right? So we kind of always design on happy path, but what about when this happens? So then we'd have to solve for that and build that into our backlog. So this is just an example of what the backlog looked like. And I love this quote here. So it's design thinking, to me, you have this really complex process of service orders, and it talks to CRM, it talks to ECC, there's warranties and contracts, we order parts from vendors and from our warehouse and from, you know, their van they use parts. But it really boils it down into, you know, kind of just step by step. And how do we make a workflow that's very linear so that technicians don't have to think about what order to do things in? And then selfishly, as the business operations guy, it's really nice to be able to have that, because now everybody, you can measure every step of that process, see where your failure points are, inspect it, right? But it really helps, I think, boil that down and get you to a clear picture of where we're trying to go.
Yep. How many people recognize the screenshot of a Jira backlog? Thought so.
Right? There we go. So here's kind of what the final product looks like. We deployed this a few years ago now, but You'll see on the left-hand side is kind of our launch pad. So that we have some different tiles where techs can check their schedule, see what's on their van inventory, things like that. And then we go into the workflow. So we really kind of did this as a step 1 through 5. And so it starts them with their schedule, right? And when they click Start Travel, what's cool is it does a timestamp, and it captures when they started traveling. So they no longer have to write down, oh, I left my house at 7:08. It just automatically grabs that for them. And then once they get on site and they begin work, you'll see that Start Service button. So that ends their travel. Now it starts tracking their labor, right? So if they're doing this in real time, much more accurate, much easier for them because it's one button versus having to key stuff in. And what's cool now is we recently launched Field Service Management as our dispatch solution from SAP. And the planning board, actually, we did some integration. So when they hit Start Travel, we now see a car icon on the job. When they get on site, they see a wrench. When they end the job, it adjusts that end time so they can see, did this tech end early? Did they run late? Where before our coordinators, because they were doing it at the coffee shop or 5 p.m. when they get home doing their orders, they didn't have any idea where the tech was, what they were doing. So that's been a huge win. And to me, if there's one slide that kind of calls out the success of that design thinking philosophy and approach, it's this one. We had technicians that for 4 to 5 years prior to this were using CRM, and that's what they were comfortable with, right? And it's really hard to get somebody that's been a tech for 40 years to change, right? And so Fiori for them was an opt-in kind of a thing. We didn't remove CRM, they could still use it. But what you see is very, very quickly, we had really great adoption, which tells me that, because it was designed by techs for techs, we came out with a really good product. And, back to that iterative thing, when we would do the sprint work, we do sprints every 2 weeks. And once there was certain functionality built, we would do demos, and we would pull in the technicians and the schedulers and all these people. And they would say, yep, you nailed it, or nope, you need to move this doesn't make any sense, or that's where we come up with a lot of those exceptions as well. So you get to a place where by the time you're at the end of development, they've already given all their feedback. So there's not, you end up with a really good product at the end.
And it's not the fail early, fail often approach, it's the demo early and demo often approach of just getting all of that feedback every 2 weeks. And that builds the backlog. That prioritized a lot of stuff for us. We would see something in a demo, people would have a question, Blane would get on the phone with them, let's dig into that, what was your question? And all of a sudden, there's brand new stories at the top of the priority list because, hey, we know we need to do this is important.
Well, and I think the other benefit is you don't get all the way to the end of development and go, oh crap, and then you've done all this throwaway work or you have to kind of unwind all this stuff. So, but right now we're at about 97% adoption, which is pretty incredible.
Excellent.
All right, so let's talk about the business results because, we love mindset and we love working with them, but we had to pay for it, right? Again, we were very on purpose about what we were going after, and the logic that we really put into Fiori, I think, was where we got the big benefit. So again, that linear approach and making sure that we enforce the different business practices and SOPs that we have. So same-day confirmation, what you'll see is the light blue is when we were using CRM. The dark blue is when we transitioned to Fiori. And then the last bar is the percent improvement. So because it was so cumbersome to use the laptops in the office, a lot of our technicians were doing, maybe their work orders at the end of the week or the end of the day. So we had very poor same-day confirmation, about 41%. With Fiori, it went up immediately to 91. So why is that important? Our customers get that immediate feedback. Hey, I was in your office. Here's what I did. Here's what parts I used, right? The one-call resolution was another big one. John talked about parts and in their van and stuff. We were at 46% in CRM because it was so hard for them to look and see what their inventory was in their van. If I'm in an office, I don't want to, maybe run out to my van and it's on a parking ramp somewhere in New York City, who knows, so they just would order a part and come back. where now it actually shows them an icon that's either red or green if it's on their van. So they can see that. And then finally, the equipment records. That's really important to us because we have about 200 different vendors that we sell equipment for and service equipment for. And we need to know what we're working on so we can tell if it's under warranty, if it's under contract. And also for our customers, they want to know, as a dentist, you know, how much have I spent on this darn chair in room 3, right? Should I keep throwing money into it, or should I buy a new one? So, and then you can see continued improvement on the bottom there. That was as of last year.
Yeah. And the equipment records here, the really cool thing we implemented along with the project was, okay, how do we make sure these equipment records are valid? Well, let's make sure we have a QR code on absolutely everything in a dentist office. Let's make sure on the bottom of the chair or on a tool set or wherever we can on those larger pieces of equipment, we don't need to key something in. We can take a picture and I can validate that as an equipment record against my phone because I'm just there in the office going through my app. Here's my different steps of, okay, I know I'm working on this piece of equipment. Yep, it's correct. Great, move on.
Right. Yep. Well, and I think the other thing that was cool is we really kind of, with design thinking, rethought how we approached equipment records. Before in CRM, they would get, if let's say that one didn't exist, they had to find the make and the model to create an equipment record, but they had to look through, there was 161,000 different equipment materials, right? Because we have 200 different vendors. So it is extremely challenging to try and find the right one. So we kind of had this concept of equipment type, where we took that 161,000 and said, which of these are equipment that our techs would actually work on in the field, which is a small subset of that, and that's what they search now instead of the full 161. It's a lot easier. So just stuff like
so
that.
So you can say it's a chair, or it's a sterilizer, or it's a, you know, what the other types are.
To filter down to even further.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, this one is probably our biggest benefit, even though it doesn't look very impressive, right? The graph isn't too crazy, but this really looks at how many hours, or how many hours we bill per job that we do. We went up about 5.65. The reason being, we had an SOP that said, as a technician, you should always bill 1 hour minimum, and then in 15-minute increments after that. But what was happening is in CRM, that wasn't enforced, right? So they had to remember. There was nothing that popped up that said, hey, you didn't do this right. So in a lot of cases, we weren't charging correctly. In Fiori, we automated that. And so it automatically, with those buttons, you know, start service, complete visit, calculates it, and then we'll do that logic. So just that was about $5 million in incremental labor revenue in the first year, which more than paid for Mindset. John's, did you get a raise? Well, I see you're VP now, so yeah.
Just right.
All right. Oops. Another thing we saw is turn time improvement. So turn time is just simply how long does it take from when we create a service order until we complete a service order and resolve the customer's issue. So what you'll see is the blue bar graphs going up and down is the number of orders we closed in CRM. So you'll see where the orange starts coming in is when we were doing Fiori. And the blue line on the graph there is our turn time in CRM. So we were running 20 to 25 days because, again, they just weren't doing things in real time. Immediately after launching Fiori, we snapped to 10, which is insane. You know, it's over twice as good. So why is this a big deal? We can't recognize our revenue until and invoice the customer until the service order is complete. So this is huge. Some verbatims, I think kind of overarching theme is way easier, way faster. They loved kind of that linear approach where they didn't have to remember what order to do things in. And what was cool is because they can do things in real time on their phone throughout the day, when they get done with their last office of the day, they can walk out and they're done. You know, they don't have to go home and open up their laptop and log in and spend an hour entering, orders in CRM. They're done. So
that was some of the biggest feedback, I think. You know, even when traveling around the road, they said, how do I not have to do this stuff at 9 p.m.? I have to be on the road at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I don't have my orders done. Like, I need to go back, look at all my notes, now that I have a stable internet connection here at home, I'm going to log in and make sure everything's ready in there. And so the other funny one I always remember on this one is that I think right when we first released it, one of the techs was so excited. He was out fishing for the weekend, and he's like, you know what? I'm taking my iPad on my fishing boat. I'm playing with all of the apps, and sent a picture to Blane, and Blane shared it with us. But here's a guy on his fishing boat, so excited to use applications that he was going to do it over the weekend, get in, make sure his appointments were set up for Monday, and apparently had a great day on the boat as well.
Right, right. Yeah, he was one of our UAT guys too. So, yeah. So I think, looking at the time, I talked about how it took 8 to 10 minutes to do a service order. We did a time study of that. Different transactions or types of service orders they would do, how long it took in CRM versus how long in Fiori. Fiori is about a third to a quarter of the time. So now, a happy path service order, 1.5 minutes. Even a challenging one, 2.5 maybe. So way better in terms of productivity. And then the other business case is really around build hours, right? So if I'm freeing up each technician doing 4 or so orders a day across 800 technicians, if I can free up minutes, that becomes hours and hundreds of hours, and now we can, start to bill more and recognize more revenue. So that's the other piece. So just to kind of wrap things up, I think what we really learned, you have to pick the right people to have in the room, to the earlier conversation, right? So make sure it's the right people that are going to give you feedback, that aren't shy, and a diverse group from all of the different stakeholders to make sure you understand all of the impacts and that all of that's taken into account, get those different perspectives. And the other thing that we liked about it is you end up with a group of people that are really excited. We talked about coming out of the session, how excited they are, but they really become your evangelists, right? They go back out to their markets, and that's why we tried to be careful to put them all over the country, because people would call, hey, what's this new Fiori thing? What's going on? What's coming? So it kind of started to build kind of that grassroots excitement. And then when we went live with Hypercare, you had that kind of extra support out there that could help new users get up to speed. And then I think the product owner role is critical. I was extremely lucky that our leadership understood how important that role was. So I was actually able to step out of my day-to-day job, so to speak, probably 90% of the time. So it just really speeds things up. You're fully engaged in the project. If you guys had questions, it wasn't, we had to set up a meeting. Oh, can't get them for 2 weeks. We were right there, and it was very fast and agile as we went through. So that's important. And then finally, I think just having a great feedback loop and being very responsive to that feedback. So we have Yammer, which is just a online forum, but that we have techs all the time going on there asking questions, giving feedback. That's where all of our backlog items come from now. All of our new enhancement requests are, what are the technicians telling me? Again, I'm not the one to prioritize it. It's really how much noise. What are we hearing the most noise about from the people using this every day, and that's what we prioritize.
And I think it was said in the last sessions too with Ryan and Jill, just those end users. I think pretty much every session I've done over the years, these are the first time those people are meeting each other. So those service techs from all the different regions, in breaks in different areas and different times, they're collaborating. They're saying, hey, how do you guys do service out in Pennsylvania? Out in East Bay, it's like this. And you can figure out, everybody has a different process. Everybody kind of does things a little bit differently based on either location, travel times, what they most likely carry, what's most likely to break down in different regions of the country. So it's really, really interesting to get all of those perspectives at once in one session and get those people collaborating and say, oh, well, hey, that's how I do this. Maybe that's something good that the rest of the company can use. And so picking those end users is key. And then, for me, really being able to ride around in the vans was really key, and empathizing exactly, we got to change this. Like, to get to, I think if you look at the value statement there, the one slide was, we only saved 5 minutes per service order. But if you think 5 minutes for 800 to 1,000 service techs on every single order, that adds up really quickly. And that's how you get to that $5 million of savings, is just incremental, small improvements that lead to vast business savings and results.
Yeah.
So this was a really fun one for me.
Yeah, me too. And I think the other thing, and you know, talking about the feedback is, it's one thing if you have a forum where they can share that, but it's really all about, are they feeling like you're really taking it seriously, right? So we monitor that very closely. We usually reply literally within like 10 minutes if they post something on there. And then we're very transparent about, you know, what's being prioritized and, you know, hey, this is a great idea. I'm going to create an enhancement request for this. So they really feel like we take it to heart, and it's truly shaping the future of what we're going to be doing with the product. So,
kind of like another thing that Sam said is something that I've always lived by for software, and that is, how do I create a pull instead of a push? So I'm in IT. I have, you know, there's amazing, great ideas from everybody in IT, and we want to push software on top of people, right? We want to have the latest and greatest features and technologies out there in front of folks. That's not what gets them through their day. They have to get through their job. And so having those service techs in design thinking and in the process the entire time has them invested. And so they want to now pull the software from IT. They say, this is coming, this is great, I helped with it. How can we get this faster? And that just helps prioritization. That helps the business say, hey, wow, this must be really important. Let's put a lot of effort behind this.
right. So any questions?
Yeah.
Do we have time?
I think we have a few
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, we're doing well.
Talk a little bit about your team. During the project, and I'm looking more for internal versus consulting, and then as it morphs into support.
Sure. So we had, I think, a couple developers on site from Mindset that really helped with the build. And then we also had some people from our IT side that sat with them. And so there was a lot of knowledge transfer that happened throughout that process. So as we went sprint by sprint, our team just kept learning more and more and more and more, to where now Mindset made us experts, right? We've got a couple people who can do most things in Fiori. Mm-hmm. They're not to the level of these guys, but you know, that was something that was really cool to see. And then so as we went through hypercare, we continued to have Mindset on site to help us work through that. And then I don't remember how many months, was it, I don't know, a couple months maybe after mm-hmm. that. And then they rolled off, and then we were able to, again, just through that knowledge transfer, kind of take that over and support it ourselves.
And it was slowly over time, you know, in those development sprints, Patterson resources were developing alongside of us. So it's kind of building that COE internally, where you get this nice kind of almost supply-demand curve, where you see, you know, skills from Patterson comes up, Mindset resources roll off, and they're able to support and take the solution on forward, have small enhancement requests, and be able to get those into production pretty easily. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
Okay.
She's got a very important job. So we talked a lot about looking at ROI after the fact. Do you have any methods or approaches to predicting ROI before actually implementing? What do you look at, and how do you go about that approach and predicting the ROI before you have a chance to measure it after the fact?
Yeah. So one of the areas within design thinking is to think exactly of that. What do we want this solution outcome to be? What types of things do we want to measure long term? And then how will we actually be able to capture those KPIs and make sure we can measure them long term, right? We were looking at statistics from 21, 22, and up until today, but that doesn't come without an amazing product manager that thinks of those KPIs to start with. And I'll let you answer as well.
Yeah, and I think too, if you think back to that high-res prototype, right? You could kind of start to do time studies to say, how much time are we going to save per transaction? So you can really start to think about, even very early into it, what is the business case, and how will these things help? Again, just all the automation you can do with Fiori is the really cool thing. I mean, you have so many clicks and things if you're using CRM or ECC, where in Fiori you can hit one button and it does this huge big workflow and you're done.
Yeah, And it's something that we take into account. So in my role these days in looking at accelerators and how we can accelerate people's business in different functional process areas, we look at things exactly like that. So one space that we're working is a lot is plant maintenance and service-related tasks, just the same as this use case. But we look beforehand, okay, let's say your company has 800 mobile field service technicians. What can happen if we save each of them 5 minutes? So we go to labor costs, we go to efficiencies gained, what parts are used, and just do sample calculations off of that and say, okay, for 800 people, we're saving them 30 minutes per day. Let's say they work on 4 service orders per day, 5 to 10 minutes per service order, and you just start to build that out, and you can really prove a huge business case out of those things. That's what tracks in the millions right away almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go next. Can you talk a little bit about adaptability and what you did with like change management? You can get a lot of the workforce in the field that is used to what they do, right? And just kind of their daily repetition. How do you break that mold? And how do you, kind of get them to the point where they adopt it, use it? Did you force it, or did you have more of just kind of the advertising and commercializing of kind of pushing that out? And did you start with like small groups, or did you go big bang?
Sure. So we did do a phased approach, but we really used as much as we could the technicians that helped us in the design thinking to be kind of the evangelist to get it out there. So rather than me from corporate saying, this is the greatest thing ever, right? How much credibility do I have with the service technician, right? So we really tried to get the technicians and some of their verbatims to help sell this to their peers, to say, no, really, guys, this is great. It's awesome. And we did some teaser, communication, showed them some screenshots, maybe a video real quick of what a service order could look like, just to kind of start building that excitement. But it was not forced. It was, we had reporting, again, very on purpose about what you measure before you actually do the project. And that helps you design in a way so you get the metrics you want. One of those was what percentage of our confirmations are created in Fiori versus CRM. And that's where you saw that graph. So it was a very much an opt-in strategy, but you saw how quickly that went up because of that approach.
Yeah, there was official trainings and things like that people came to just to learn the buttons and placements, things that hadn't seen it before. I think by the time we went live with the first group, everybody had seen it multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just building up to a release. It's just making sure you're kind of drip feeding all of those people. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's some features. Give us some feedback. So it's all an iterative loop. But to what Blane said, it was really kind of a grassroots effort from the techs that came to design thinking, went out into their regions, and were able to talk about it.
Yep. And we also did an e-learning that made it feel kind of like that high-res mock-up where you're kind of going through step by step how it would work. So that was kind of fun. It's kind of that gaming training kind of thing.
Any last question?
What are the barriers that you're seeing to getting to 100% adoption? Because you had about an 8-9% adoption rate. What are the barriers?
Yeah. So we still have a very small percentage of service orders with kind of some weird exception things that we didn't solve for in the product. I remember the slide from Sam at the beginning. It talked about that there was a study and what percentage of features never get used was like 80%. So we tried to be careful not to build for the 2%, right? And there are still a few things. One is if they have parts that are serialized, they have to receive those in ECC that can't do it through Fiori. So that would be one example. Other than that, it's usually some goofy, a system error came up that we can't clear or something like that. But otherwise, it's pretty much 100%. I'm sorry, I had a hard time. Oh, yeah, thanks.
So you had a CRM tool before, right? So that means you had to train end users. After you deployed Fiori, what was your time saving or cost saving with respect to end user training?
Right, so we averaged about 8 minutes per transaction in CRM for service orders, and we went down to 2 minutes in Fiori. So it was, 4 times So to John's point, then you extrapolate that over 800 technicians, 4 transactions a day, 250 work days a year, and all of a sudden you're talking about real money.
How about end user, right? Like you have to train end user, like you have to spend more time, less time on end user training, equivalent like with Fiori?
Oh, you said,
would you do
would we do
Yeah,
more?
would you do more?
Yeah.
Where you didn't have to spend, a full session of training someone, it was intuitive enough that someone could just, you could use it. Like I said, you don't
Right.
know the job, I can hand it to you and you can do it.
I think that was one thing I really liked about kind of the e-learning approach and having it be kind of a click-through, because they could do it at their own pace. And if they weren't getting it, they could keep going through it, or they could spend more time on each step. But I think that's what we heard a lot is, this is so intuitive, I don't even need training.
Yeah, and so when you onboard brand new service techs,
Right.
is there an onboarding time? Is it, 1 week, 1 hour?
Oh, no, but just the Fiori part of it is the easy part.
Yeah.
I mean, they take an e-learning, and within an hour, they can run the app easily. Yeah. It's all the technical training, learning all the
How
products.
to actually
That's the
fix
hard part. Yeah, right.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're pretty close to time here. So we were the only thing getting in between you and lunch. Therefore, after this session, lunch will be served kind of exactly where breakfast was. Feel free. I forgot the timing or how long we have for lunch. I think it's one hour that we have for lunch. So feel free to go out. There's the booths out there, so labs, accelerators, kind of our solutions and sales process, and then some of our SAP experts. We'll all be out milling around, and feel free to chat. So thanks very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Blane.
You bet.